How can we make the world better? By making ourselves better. The Dr. Joe Show explores how you can make positive personal change by using his groundbreaking and highly effective I Am approach to understand who we are and why we do what we do. Your small changes can have big effects.
Join us now for the Dr. Joe Show with Mark Stiles of Stiles Law and your host, Dr. Joe Schrand.
Hey, it's me and Dr. Joe. Right here on WATD, live in studio.
Live in studio. Mark Stiles of Stiles Law.
Coming at you.
Yeah. So what do you guys think of this rebranding, right? Me and Dr. Joe instead of the Dr. Joe Show. Mark, I mean, if this is
the
your
research
idea.
is in. I mean, the engagement is in. Like,
yeah.
Unequivocally, universally.
Yeah.
They love it.
Yeah.
They love it. Me and Dr. Joe.
Me and Dr. Joe Show instead of the Dr. I'm fine with it. I mean, it distinguishes out.
What do you think, listener? Do you think he's fine with it?
Yeah. I really am, because I like the expansion of it, because it's not really just about me, because it's never been about me. But the me and Dr. Joe is all of our guests.
All
not
of
just,
us.
Not just...
It's our listener.
It's our listeners.
Right.
That's right.
It's everyone.
Could be we and Dr. Joe, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Grammatically, it gets weird, though.
Yeah, it does.
Well, you know what? I was listening to an episode of Me and Dr. Joe today. I was working in the yard a little bit. I had some free time between appointments, and I was listening to the one with District Attorney Rob Gallibois and his team. Came out really well, Thomas. Nice job with
Nice
that.
job, Tom.
It came out great, and it could be found on anywhere you consume podcasts.
Right.
And it reminded me of the Drug Story Theater. And that amazing mission that you're on, and and it's really wonderful listening again to how supportive they were. Right, they're bringing you in front of all of the schools on the Cayman Islands to present, so that they can then force multiply and continue to send the beautiful message of the proactive message that Drug Story Theater provides. And for our guests and our listeners, can you share again what Drug Story Theater is and the mission?
I would be happy to, and it's amazing. We've been doing this for 10 years now, so we've reached hundreds of thousands of kids. But the idea is this: we take teenagers in the early stages of recovery from drugs and alcohol. We teach them improvisational theater, and then we use something called psychodrama, and they create their own scripted shows about the seduction of, addiction to, and recovery from drugs and alcohol. And then they perform those shows for middle schools and high schools, so the treatment of one becomes the prevention of many. That's our slogan. The treatment of one becomes the prevention of many. But in between each scene of the show, the kids step out of character and they teach the audience about the neuroscience of adolescent brain development, and why the adolescent brain is at such risk for addiction simply because the way the brain is developing. So the real message is addiction is not about morality, it's about mortality. It's just the way the brain is. All the kids in the audience take a pre-show and post-show neuroscience quiz, and we measure how kids who learn about their brain change their perception about drugs and alcohol. Not trying to scare anyone, but just saying, based on the way your brain is developing, we're asking you just to wait. If you're going to use it all, just wait until you're over the age of 21. And thanks to one of my colleagues from Yale, Andreas Martin, who's a professor there, he got a paper for us published looking at the efficacy of peer-to-peer as a teaching tool. And, we got a scientific paper published, so we have this what's called evidence-based to show that this particular process is really working. And we have kids, our same kids, who've been with us now for years. They've grown up with Drug Story Theater, and they're doing amazing things. So
isn't that wonderful? Yeah, and you have some new news on the front for Drug Story Theater, another welcome adulation for what you're doing.
Yes, we are going to be presenting this year at the Massachusetts Providers Council, which is a huge venue, one of the largest health service organizations. And we're very honored to be presenting there. We're going to be doing a number of different presentations on and off. I want to thank Kathleen Wright, my COO, Nicole Conlon, who is helping me with the script, and she's our executive director. Mark's been involved. Tom has been there helping to film things, but it's really the kids. We should bring them back in.
That would be great.
And the DA was fantastic because he actually was there talking with us at a presentation we did at Mass Maritime recently, which is in his district. So,
Mass Maritime. Great segue.
Yeah. Why is that, man? What's going on with Mass Maritime?
Mass Maritime, fine institution here in our state, our Commonwealth of Massachusetts. A great institution, and they're generous enough to provide their campus for the overnight on the Pan Mass Challenge. And folks, yes, we do. Another week in the limited series on Pan Mass Challenge. We have 2 new guests.
Yeah.
Who are here to share stories and their why as to why do they ride? Why are they continuing to do what they do?
Well, would you please introduce our guest for this evening, Mike?
Oh, I would be amazingly honored to do that, Dr. Joe. We first have this gentleman, this amazing human being sitting to my left. He has been on the Dr. Joe Show previously, and now he's been on me and Dr. Joe Show. He is an amazing human being. He's ridden this ride for many, many years, more than anyone that I ride with. He is a cancer survivor, so he's living proof, as we call this group of amazing humans in the Pan Mass community. He's an educator. He is probably the finest educator in the region. I hear that over and over and over again from everybody who has been touched by this amazing guy. I was blessed to know him at an earlier age when our kids were playing Little League Baseball together, and we would sit at the end of my pickup truck in center field and solve all the world's problems while watching our boys elevate their skills as best they could. So without further ado, Steve Waisgerber.
Welcome, Steve Waisgerber.
Well, I don't need to say anything else. I think I can leave right now.
Well, let me introduce our other guest.
Oh, that's a good idea, yeah.
So to Sherpa Steve's left, we have another amazing individual from the South Shore. Many of you know him both from his professional career as a financial advisor, but probably most people know this gentleman from his active volunteerism, his altruism. He's a major force at the local Boys and Girls Club here in Marshfield, and we all know from being part of the South Shore community what a huge asset that is. First time riding with us on Pan Mass, first time Pan Mass rider, strong rider though, by the way. I've noticed that while training with this guy. And I'm really excited to welcome Paul Reardon to me and Dr. Joe Show to talk about his stories of the Pan Mass. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, guys.
Welcome, Paul. Welcome. Glad to have you here. So why don't we start with you, Paul?
Let's do it.
This is your first time riding with Pan Mass?
Just for a little clarification, so
Okay.
it's my first time riding with
them.
with Mark and his group.
So how many years have you been doing Pan Mass?
So I started actually 25 years ago.
Whoa, yes, that is a good clarification. Thank you,
Yes,
Paul.
well, but I have a little bit of a bookend story. So I started 25 years ago in 1999, and I rode, at that time just because I wanted the challenge of doing the event. I was starting to get into riding at that time, and I didn't know much about it. It was obviously before social media time we are right now, so there was the website was pretty generic. But I knew some people that rode it, and I wanted to learn more about it. I didn't have like a personal tie to cancer. I just thought about the challenge. But while I was thinking about doing it, a good friend of mine who I went to high school and college with was diagnosed with cancer. So that sort of just put me over the hump to just go ahead and say, I'm going to do it. And so I signed up for it. I was completely blown away by the event when I did it. Just the magnitude of one single event for one single cause, and just the way it was organized, the camaraderie of the riders and the volunteers. It was just, the whole thing just blew me away. So I did it. I did it for 5 or 6 more years after that. It had personal connections right off the bat because my dad had cancer the following year. And thankfully, both my father and my good friend Mark were both full survivors. And but it just made the event much more impactful for me year in, year out, because I had some people every single year that were impacted by cancer, and obviously it impacted me on the ride. But then I took a leave from it, so I took some time off, and I did some other events for Dana-Farber that were non-biking events. So I got away from it for 20 years, and but for the last 15 years, I've biked. I biked regularly, around town, and biked with a good friend of ours who Mark knows and Steve knows, Scott Hamill, and Scott and I just biked, for probably thousands of miles every summer just together. And Scott, unfortunately, was diagnosed with cancer himself several years back, and he fought an incredible fight against his cancer, and unfortunately, he passed away last summer. And he was a great guy, great, a son, a great husband, a great father, just a great friend. And we all miss him dearly. And but the one thing about him, if you knew him, was he was a passionate bike rider. You saw him all around town with his bright orange helmet all the time. And we rode a ton together, and he rode all throughout his treatment. He went through a really tough treatment, and he always rode. And Mark, you and I, and and Scott and Jeff and your group, we rode some of those Stellwagen rides, and they were a blast. So when he passed away, I saw what Mark and his group were doing with the PMC. And I was kind of in awe of like how they had been doing it for so long. And so myself and another fellow, Marshall resident that rides all the time, and I grew up with him and Scott, Judd Hill. We both said, you know what, we're gonna ride this year. So we decided to coming out of the retirement after 20 years, coming back in this year, and and I'm honored to be riding in his name for Scott this year in his memory. So that's how I'm back into it.
Love it.
So first year with the Marshall guys, though.
Well, welcome back. It is a community, and I want to come back to Steve right after this because we have a community of sponsors as well. Right. And our community of sponsors, they help us survive. So why don't we take a commercial break? We'll be right back with me and Mark Stiles and Dr. Joe.
Hey folks, thank you for listening to the Dr. Joe Show. We've been investigating whether or not we want to bring sponsors into our podcast. What are your thoughts? Do you know somebody who might be a good partner with the Dr. Joe Show, who may want to align their product or service with the Dr. Joe Show? Think about it.
Hi, Larry. We're back with Larry and me and Dr. Joe and Steve Waisgerber, who's riding the Pan Mass Challenge next week. Yeah.
I'd love to hear your story, Steve. Let's
why,
Steve? Hear
why
are
do you ride?
riding?
Why?
30 plus years.
Wow.
So I've been doing it so long, I can tell the joke now that I have Pan Mass T-shirts that are older than most of the riders who are there. Right?
Yeah.
And so, like Paul does it in 99, and it's sort of that challenge. That's something to do. In 10 years earlier, 11 years earlier, it was the same thing. That a buddy of mine and I, who had just gotten back into riding, decided there was a little brochure that said, come join. And it was a small organization that was about 7 or 8 years old, and so we said, yeah, let's give it a shot. And we decided that we were going to get involved in it, and we knew nothing about it, and it was brutally hot the first year, and it was like, why would anybody do this? And then we're talking to people, and we're riding with people, and we're hearing stories, and we're seeing signs, along the way about people who have gone through treatment and have lost loved ones and have survived it, and we say, oh, we're hooked. We're hooked. And the next year, another buddy of mine got involved, and my wife got involved as a volunteer the next year, both as a nurse and just helping out at the end. And then the third year, then I get diagnosed, and so it kind of changes it a little bit. It kind of throws a little bit of a twist into it, and between going through the surgeries and going through the chemotherapy, I was able to continue and fortunate enough to continue to go all the way through it. The next year or 2 years later, a good friend of mine's son and one of his good friend's daughters both were diagnosed, and they went through it for the next couple of years themselves. So and then we began to kind of get more and more people involved, and it's like Marshall Rams Cancer, or it's like the Greater Marshall community. It's an amazing and a beautiful thing to see how people kind of come together and every year, unfortunately, there's another person. There's another person who gets diagnosed, or another person who struggles. There's another person, another family who loses a loved one, and we can all give those names, right? I mean, and that's the tragedy of what happens every August. But the incredible part about it is that you have all of these people. Now you have 5,000 riders who get together. You have another 5,000 volunteers who get together. And you have people who are just in the same corner as everyone else is. Making sure that there's support, both emotionally and financially for what these people are going through. And as the time has gone on, I just kind of say, let's do it again, or let's do it again, or let's do it again, and so I just haven't really stopped doing it. And still, it is without question, it is the best weekend of the entire year. It is something that I look forward to every August. We kind of center everything around what happens there, so everything gets put on hold for that weekend. And this year I'll be riding with a friend of mine, John, who got into it on the third or the fourth year, and he will be doing his 20th ride, I think, this year. He had taken some time off as well. And my buddy Michael, who I did it back in 1988, he'll be doing his 30th year. He had taken about 7 years, his dark period of time, like musicians do, and he'll be doing it. He'll be doing it again, and so it's a great time, and I've been so fortunate to get to know people like Paul and people like Mark, and Rams Cancer people who just make it that much better a weekend.
So, I'm hearing the joy that you guys experience, but what does that say about who we are as human beings, and how does that tap into really what's going on in our world right now, where there's so much conflict, there's so much anger and tension, and yet here's something where it brings people together. Paul, what do you make of that?
I mean, I think everyone's, life is hard, right, for everybody in a lot of different ways. And I think when you have a collective group of people who are working together for like one common goal, doesn't matter what it is. There's a big community around that, and there's a big, people really get into that. And I think the PAMS is a perfect example. I mean, the amount of riders, the amount of volunteers that start out from day one, it's just everyone's got the same common goal. Everyone's working together, find a cure for cancer, and to support the riders, to support the families, like Steve said, the people who've been directly impacted by it. So I think everyone's just looking, to find the positive in things, and it's hard. It's harder and harder every day to do that nowadays, because you get inundated with a lot of negative news, and then you hear these type of stories, and people are like, wow, there's good out there, and there's a lot of good out there.
There is a lot of good. See, what's your take on
it? I firmly believe that the negativity that is out there is far less than the good that is out there. So I think that this is sort of that example. Like, we can get caught up in going at one another, and we don't necessarily see what good that does, right? In fact, if anything, it's counterproductive. And whether that's with a family, or whether that's with a job, or whether that's with friendships, or whether that's the Pan Mass Challenge, or whether that's with with politics in the United States or the world as a whole. But I think that we are prone to wanting to do more for each other, and I think that's what the Pan Mass does. I'm sure that this has been said a number of times in the last few weeks, but the $1 billion financial mark was crossed 2 weeks ago. Just sort of let that kind of wash over all of us, how much that is. I mean, I look at my own story with cancer, and I know that, you know, in that spring that I was going through chemotherapy, new drugs had just come out. I benefited a week after new drugs were approved. Timing wise, that, you know, would not have been possible even before. I mean, so we see what can happen when people do come together, and I think that if anything in the world, you know, what is wonderful about what happens in this world, what can be wonderful, is when people do work together. It is far easier just to go at one another, and we don't see that. We don't see that weekend. We don't see that Friday afternoon when we go out to Sturbridge, we go to Wellesley and we check in. We don't see that when we're waiting in line to get ready to ride out of Sturbridge or Wellesley. We don't see that on the road. We don't see that at Mass Maritime or Sunday morning when it's dark and people are sore. We see smiles. We see pats on the back. We see, you know, pushing people forward. We see. I think the wonder of what people are and the possibility of what can happen.
Mm-hmm. Mark, what about you?
Well, I think you've heard that theme, Dr. Joe, with all of the guests. It's this surreal environment of utopia, right? We're all pushing in the same direction. There is not one obstacle other than the big obstacle that we're all pushing toward. But everybody's moving in the same direction, and it is such an amazing feeling, and it gives you this immense sense of hope. And there's so much of the hope around the cancer treatments and the announcements of the new drugs, as Steve was talking about. Every year they're bringing out more amazing stories of success, you know, to the point where you actually start to believe in your soul that cancer is going to go away based on this group of people, right? You feel part of something, this movement, it's palpable. It's why people keep doing it. You know, it's riding is fun-ish, you know. We've talked about it. I'm not a cyclist. You know, I'm a fundraiser who rides a bike. But there's something unique about the PMC and the weekend and the gratitude and all of what PMC is. It's like nothing I've ever experienced. And Steve's right. It's the greatest weekend of the year. And at the end, you know, you're like, I don't know if I'm going to do this again next year. You know, my feet hurt, my back hurts, my butt hurts, you know, it hurts. Yet then you realize what is actually happening, and it's impactful, it's tremendously inspiring, and it's hard to stop.
And I don't want to come across as being Pollyanna about the whole thing. I mean, it is a difficult physical endeavor. It is emotionally very difficult. There is part of the ride in which, you know, you come out of a rest stop and you get about 15 miles and you come on to this rest stop in Lakeville, and about a mile before the rest stop happens, there are 2 foot by 3 foot posters of children, these beautiful pictures of kids, each of whom is going through cancer treatment, and their name is right at the bottom. And so it goes from, you know, people sort of talking or down hard on your bike, kind of going along, and then the pictures stand you right up. And this is what it is as well. So, and it's the names of the people, right, who have gone through it. It's parents, it's friends, it's Scott, it's, you know, it's other people who are on Rams Cancer who have gone through it. It's, you know, it's the Vickies, and it's the Matthews, and it's the Davids, and it's all of those people. It's the Kieras. It's those people who who we ride for, right, who can't, right? They can't do it. So on one hand, we pat ourselves on the back and we enjoy really what we're doing, and we're fundraisers, right? But we're not riders. We're just not built that way. But what we do is we make it possible for really good things to happen.
Yeah. And that's so important, that there are people in the world like you who make these really good things happen. The possibility of it, just like our sponsors who also make good things possible for all of us. So we're going to cycle back to this in a moment. We'll take a break. We'll be right back with me and Dr. Joe.
Hey, folks, welcome back. So any thoughts? Do you listen to other podcasts? Do you see how they do the sponsors? Is there a way that they're utilizing sponsors that you enjoy or you don't enjoy? I listen to SmartList, and I really enjoy how the co-hosts share the voiceover for the product or service. It's really funny for the most part, but it's unique. It's them really endorsing. Does that work? What do you think? Hey, Larry. Hey, listener. We're back. It's me and Dr. Joe talking Pan Mass, Season 4, Episode 8 on Pan Mass Challenge, right? And I love talking about it.
I'm so glad that we keep talking about it, because cancer is real. It affects so many people. Even if you're not aware of people who've been affected, you have seen them. You are with them. You may not be aware of it. And what's also really great is that it's not a secret anymore. I mean, having some medical conditions can be shaming, and some people are afraid, especially, substance use, addiction work, mental health stuff. Yet we are okay with being able to say, I've had cancer, or I know someone with cancer, and there's no shame to it. Instead, there's this human condition where we say, we want to help people. Because it wasn't their fault. Although, how many people with lung cancer were blamed or immediately assumed that they were smokers? Even that stigma, even that has been less and less and less. So the work that you guys are doing, as I say, it's helping people you will never meet. That is powerful. That's powerful. But how do you raise funds for it? How do you volunteer for it? Mark, you want to...
Well, first and foremost, listener, pmc.org, while you're listening in, and Google it up, pmc.org, and you can search your riders, and I encourage you to search Paul Reardon and Steve Waisgerber, who are our guests tonight, and donate, because your dollars, 100% of your money is going directly to the research and treatment at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, and that's one of the real amazing things. And the reasons why I'm so attached to this, because 100% of their dollars are going, to the cause.
Yeah, and certainly many, if not most, nonprofits cannot claim that, even if they have fundraising. It is huge.
Huge. And fundraising isn't easy, except for Steve Waisgerber. It's really easy. It's a compound effect for Steve. And... he's got his list, and they know it's coming. And if they don't donate, then it's coming, right?
What happens?
Well, then the letter goes out again, and then again. The fundraising, without question, is the hardest part.
Yeah, it's a big barrier.
It is, then the first year when we did it, it was $600 that you had to raise, and now it's $6,000.
Wow.
And so
they take your credit card, so if you don't raise it,
you
pay it.
Really?
And when I had talked about the numbers of people who had done it, right, many of whom were not able to do it, right, because of the fundraising, right, and so people can do the ride. I mean, you just got to get on the bike and ride. It's not comfortable, but you can do it,
right.
But it is the fundraising, and that's the hardest part. So as much as we talk about it being a community, it's a fundraiser, and that's the genius of it. It's And that's the first and foremost thing that the Pan Mass wants to do, is they want to raise as much money as humanly possible, and $1 billion is that.
Oh yeah.
Right. So, and then we look at people who get involved, and my son did it. One son did it for 2 years. Another son, was involved in it for a little bit during the COVID time. But it's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
So, some people collect the money in big gobs. They make the $6,000. Maybe they write a check for themselves for the $6,000. Maybe that's what happens. And then there are other people who raise it, $25 at a time, and that's a lot of checks. That's a lot of checks, and I have people who have donated to me for 37 years.
Wow.
And every year I get their money, whatever that is, and whether it's $5 a year or $5,000 a year, that's what comes in. But it's that's part of the deal. That's what you have to be able to do, right? So there's us, the riders, who are really well taken care of, right? And what do we have to? We got to get on the bike and we got to ride. And what do we got to do? We got to raise money. But there are people who are involved in this ride, who are actually the ones who do all of the work. And I would maintain that the riding and the fundraising is actually the riding is easy. It hurts, but it's easy, right?
Yeah.
Given what people go through. But there are 5,000 volunteers. There are all of these people who are involved in the volunteer part of the Pan Mass Challenge, right?
Sure.
And I know, Paul, your daughter's doing it this year. She's going to volunteer. There are students at the high school who are doing it. There are people who are fully committed to that. My wife first got involved in it, and in fact, at the Pan Mass Challenge Bridge at the Dana-Farber, there's a picture of my wife from 1990.
Oh wow!
That is right there. So she works at Dana-Farber. She
Cool.
works,
That's great.
and but she walks across the Pan Mass Challenge Bridge as she sees a picture from 30 years ago. So
That's funny.
So, Paul, how did you convince your daughter is going to be volunteering?
Yeah, so it's the volunteer side of it is pretty interesting, right? I know Jim and Dave talked about it last week, and you can't talk about the Pan Mass without talking about the volunteer
Right.
side of it, because I think the riders are the face of the ride, but the volunteers are really what makes it come together. And I just remember even my first year, people would ask me, how was the ride, and I said, the ride was great, but the volunteers are incredible.
Yeah.
They treat you like royalty.
Yeah.
And and funny story, like my grandmother was from England, very proper woman. We would just say what's on our mind in a very polite way. And I remember when I was younger, hanging out with her, and we were watching some show, and there was some celebrities on TV, and she looks at me and she goes, "What's all the fuss about? It's not like they cured cancer." And she said it, and it was funny at the time, right, when you heard it, and now you kind of look at it when we do an event like this, and it's been 20 years since I've done it, but I remember every water stop, every spot on the course when you have volunteers, they're treating you like you cured cancer.
Right.
And obviously that's what our goal is, and so they treat you so well that they're the main part of the ride. And to take it to the present time and talk about some of the Steve brought up in terms of some of the kids, Jess Kahn, who's a martial rider with his team, she's been riding for the last couple of years, and her daughter, she has triplets who are seniors in high school, and they volunteer every year at one of the water stops, as you mentioned. And so and I think it's fantastic. They see a parent doing something, they want to get involved in it. So my daughter Gabby's a senior in high school. She's very good friends with them. And when I told her that I was doing the PMC this year, she thought it was great. And she told me, the Con girl's a bit involved with them. I'm like, that's fantastic. We didn't really talk much more about it. I came home a couple days later, and she's like, Dad, guess what? I signed up for the Pan Mass to volunteer. I'm like, that's fantastic. But naturally, my thought was, you must be volunteering with the Con girls. So I'm like, are you with your friends? And she's like, no, I went to go sign up, and their spot was full. So I'm going to volunteer at Mass Maritime.
Cool.
And I'm like, okay, that's great. Who are you going to be with? And she's like, nobody. And I'm like, well, who are you going to hang out with? She's like, I'm just going to meet people.
There you go.
And it blew me away because, it just to have that as a parent, to have her say that, I was very proud of her that she wanted to get involved like that. And then she's getting up at 5:30 on her own. She's driving down to Mass Maritime, and she's going to be there. And to me, like, as a parent, you can't think of a better way to, you seeing your kids doing something that they're giving back to the community. And for me, when she told me she was getting involved, and all the other kids were involved, that's a bigger part of the event this weekend than me riding, is having her be a part of it. And because I think she's going to be blown away by the magnitude of the event. I think she has no idea what she's getting into. She has no idea the impact of her volunteer time has on so many people like Steve and I and Mark and all the other riders. And I think it's just going to be the fact that she's there for the whole weekend to volunteer. Yeah, that's what makes the event to us, as riders, really impactful. And I'm blessed that she's actually doing it. I think it's fantastic, and I'm really excited for her. So, and for all the volunteers who are doing it, we can't thank them enough.
Mm-hmm. And you guys are volunteering your time as well. I mean, you may have the title of rider, but you're also volunteering and raising funds, and it's going to be incredible. So the pictures of your wife from all those years ago, Steve, and there's going to be pictures now of your daughter years from now, and you'll be able to say, look what you did.
We all had a small part, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's really great. Let's give folks the website again.
PMC.org.
Yeah.
So Pan Mass Challenge, PMC.org. And then search your rider. So Paul Reardon, Steve Waisgerber, Marshfield. Really easy. Drop the donation, whatever feels right, and help us cure cancer.
Yeah. $6,000 is a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a huge barrier to entry. Because I love to share this event, so anybody who's anywhere near riding a bike, I'm always like, have you thought about doing the Pan? Have you wanted to do the Pan Mass? There's 3 obstacles to the Pan Mass, and it's the riding, the training, it's the fundraising, and then the logistics of getting to these places and staying overnight and all of that. But by far, the highest barrier to entry is always the fundraising, and a lot of people, it's paralyzing to them to think, if I don't raise money, it's going to hit my credit card, and I can't afford $6,000, to do this ride. I would love to be able to afford $6,000 to donate to cure cancer, and a lot of people are really uncomfortable asking for money.
Absolutely.
And I think that's where I add a lot of value when we're out on our rides, talking with people about the act of fundraising, and you're not asking them for money. You're inviting them to join the journey.
Yeah, that's a really good reframe.
Yeah. Because, we're riding, we're committing to the training and the riding, and how can I bring you along? Yeah. How can you participate and be part of what this amazing thing is? And sometimes it's as simple as pulling out your credit card.
Yeah.
We take on all of these people. We take on their money, right? And we take on riding for the people who have gone through cancer, or have died of it, or have survived, or will have it at some point. I mean, if the numbers of 1 out of 4 are accurate.
Well, you're helping to overcome so many obstacles to getting that cure, and luckily, we sometimes have an obstacle which we have to overcome, which is a commercial break.
Right.
So we're going to take one of those now, hear from our sponsors, who are no obstacle to anyone. Let's take a break. We'll be right back with the Dr. Joe Show.
Hey, welcome back. And again, we're super grateful for you listening to the Dr. Joe Show. If you have anyone that you think might be a good sponsor, shoot us an email at drjoepodcast@gmail.com. DRJOE podcast@gmail.com. Give us your thoughts about the show, too. We're wondering, are we talking to the trees, or are people really gaining value in this? Please let us know. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of the show.
I got the eyebrows from Larry.
You did.
I got the eyebrow raise from Larry.
Yeah, you got the eyebrow
That
raise.
must mean we're back.
We're back.
We're live
We're
in
live.
studio, WATD 95.9. Me and Dr. Joe. talking with two amazing human beings about their stories about the Pan Mass Challenge, Paul Reardon and Steve Waisgerber. And I think you have a couple questions for them, don't you?
I do indeed, based on the IM, because, the IM is basically saying we're always doing the best we can, influence and responding to 4 domains. Your home domain, we've been talking about that in a real way. The social domain, which is everything else, and we're absolutely talking about that. The biological domain of your brain and body, we're absolutely talking about that. Cancer is part of the biological domain. And then the IC domain. How do I see myself? How do I think other people see me? Because these 4 domains interact, a small change can have a big effect. We don't need to change everything. Make a small change in any of the domains, you can have a big effect through the whole system. So, Paul, let me start with you. What small change can you recommend to our listeners based on what we're talking about?
I would say try and step out of your comfort zone whenever you can. I think it's hard. I mean, it's hard for me to do that, and I've tried to do it in the past, and I've been pleasantly surprised when I've done it. So I think for anyone who can just try something different, step out of your comfort zone, you'd be surprised what awaits you.
I'm just curious. I want to just go with why that small change? What is it about stepping out of your comfort zone that can be a small change?
Because I don't think it really takes a lot of a effort to do something completely different.
Yeah.
That really you would see an impact right off the bat. So just even one change of like a daily routine that you've just never thought you would do, and you do it, you'd be surprised it all of a sudden becomes part of your regular routine.
Yeah. See, let me ask the same question. Small changes can have big effects.
So, Joe, it's interesting. There's a quote that comes to mind. There's a speech delivered by Bobby Kennedy in I think he's in South Africa in 1965, 1966, in which he talks about the changes that take place, and he uses the analogy of the small pebble that gets dropped into a still lake, and the ripples of that extend out and continue to extend out. And I think just in terms of this weekend coming up, the Pan Mass Challenge weekend, I think we all kind of go through that, right? We go through all 4 of those domains for that entire weekend. I think that carries us forward. And if we can do those little things, keep coming out of comfort zones, or challenge ourselves physically, or get ourselves to sort of do what Jim Valvano said in his Don't Give Up speech about being able to think and laugh and cry on a daily basis. And if you can do that, then you can have this, not only an amazing life for yourself, but you can have impact on people all around you.
Mm-hmm. And you're bringing a lot of the history.
Well, that's what I do.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering about that. There have been many small changes in history with huge effects. What about Pan Mass? How's that small change, you think, had an effect?
Well, as it has had on me, it has, not to sound corny or an exaggeration, but what happens with the Pan Mass allows people like myself to get through a diagnosis. The motivation going forward is that there are far too many of these people who get the diagnosis, but the treatment is not there. So it is better to get cancer now than it was 35 years ago or 50 years ago. It is way better. I mean, my wife works as a nurse practitioner in the lymphoma unit at Dana-Farber, and the treatment that is available for her patients is just incredible given what it was.
Yeah.
So part of what we do is we allow that kind of thing to happen. It is in incremental amounts. It's really it's really a mile at a time. If I paraphrase the motto of the Pan Mass, it's $1 at a time. It's a $5 donation. It's $100, whatever that is, right? And that becomes the possibility of what we all have, right? And that it allows us, as you said, it allows us to become the best that we can be at that time that we are. So what I look forward to this weekend coming up is spending time with people who are doing the absolute best that they can at that moment.
That's right. Yeah.
You know?
And that is what the IM is saying, is that we're always doing the best we can. The hardest thing about it is even cancer. If you have cancer, that's still your IM at that moment. And how do you then work with the 4 domains? The other truth, the second truth of the IM, is that everyone has one. Everyone is interested through their IC domain, what you think about them, which has an effect on their biological domain, because it feels different when you feel respected or disrespected, and you're part of someone's home or social domain. So the second truth of the IM, you control no one, but you influence everyone. You get to choose the kind of influence you want to be. Paul, let me start with you. What kind of influence do you want to be?
I would just say, just being an influence to people that can see the impact of small efforts having big impacts in the community. And selfishly, Mark mentioned I'm involved with the Boys and Girls Club, and we see that every day because people volunteer at very small amounts of time for an organization that collectively just does great things. So I think from my perspective, if people see that from me, that that I can give my time back, then they can give their time back in a lot of ways, because we're all very fortunate in a lot of ways to have what we have. You see the results right away, and it makes you want to do it again. Yeah.
Just, Drugstore Theater was actually just at the Boys and Girls Club here in Marshfield, working with the counselors and training.
That's fantastic.
And you're also a financial planner, so that is asking people to have long-term influence as well.
Sure.
Right? So there's a small change right there as well. See, what about you? What kind of influence do you want to be?
It's a hard question, and only that I think that for many of us, we try to do this on a daily basis. So I don't know if it's something that is actual, like I want to try to do this, or if it's just who we are, right? And the people who do it, and the people who do it well, that they are having an impact upon people. And it's not that they go out of their way, or they are doing something specifically to become that. They just are that. And I guess what I hope is that it's not something that I have to try to do. Mm-hmm. It's something that is like getting on a bicycle and riding, for 85 miles or 170 miles, or whatever it is. It is, and that's the muscle memory, and that's the endurance, and that's the discipline that it takes. Yeah. And hopefully that becomes the impact that we can have. So as we're riding along on day 2, and we're going through the dunes, coming into P-Town, or going out to Race Point, and it's hard, and it's windy, and it's tiring, and it's hot, and we've run out of water, and we've done all of these things, that we're there for each other. We're pulling each other along, and that's a pretty incredible thing.
Yeah. And again, it's the symbolism, the metaphor of it as well. If only we could expand that throughout all our home and social domains. Imagine what kind of influence we could all be. You're also a teacher, so you are also modeling this for how many kids now do you think you've taught?
I did the numbers at one point, so this will be coming up would be my 43rd year teaching. So like 5,000 students.
Yeah.
So hopefully there are a few.
And each of them are influencing other people.
The ripple.
Right. That's the ripple effect as well. Folks, thanks so much panmass.org.
PMC.org.
PMC.org, folks.
Steve Waisgerber, Paul Reardon, thank you.
Yeah, and Mark Stiles. Thanks, folks. Really appreciate it. All you do. Thanks, Larry. Thanks, Tom.
Dear Romeo, dragged from the vial, did he do it for love or was he just being wild? Who